So, more and more people are suggesting the idea that AA games are the future key to a healthy gaming industry. Smaller games with smaller budgets that won't put a company out of business if they don't succeed. Miasma Chronicles is a classic example of that type of AA game. You probably never heard of it because it had little marketing, little sales, and very few reviews compared to the big games you hear about all the time. That equals very little hype. Even I only heard of it because I was scrolling through the games available on my subscription of choice, PlayStation Plus Premium, and the description caught my eye. Game reviews generally show the game as being unremarkable, and some even take offense to its world and characters, but we'll talk about all that. More importantly though, we'll talk about how the reaction to this game and so many others like it goes to show that the gamers of the world may not be as ready for smaller scale games as they think they are. So, Miasma Chronicles starts off nice and slow. There are two main characters. There's Elvis, a young, optimistic, and naive young mechanic who lives in a very hostile, near-future version of America. He's out past the safety of the settlement he calls home with his robot companion, Diggs. We're going to talk about Diggs and Elvis's relationship later because it's the main focus of this game and is very hit or miss with players and reviewers. But for now, let's just say that there is solid love and loyalty between these two. One is an AI assistant, but these two are more like brothers than master and servant. Like I said, we'll return to that though. The intro finds these two out in no man's land, trying to learn to open a door that's made of a techno-organic substance called miasma. They don't know any more than we as the audience do, because despite this being in America technologically advanced enough to have autonomous AI companions walking the streets, the miasma has caused untold destruction and turned the landscape into a wasteland. Right here at the beginning, you'll see your first taste of how a smaller game does things differently than your average big-budget blockbuster. Most AAA games know the time they have to grab the audience is very short, so they focus on getting you to the action as fast as possible. Here, the devs want to set up the story in a more impactful way, so they take the more considered route and let you get to know the characters first. That choice is not better or worse, it's just not the norm, and it will throw some people off. You're here to see what's really going on in the game, and you won't let a little thing like a slow start stop you, right? Alright, let's proceed. Elvis is not just poking around out in the wasteland for nothing. He's haunted by a memory that his mother left him about learning to control the miasma before she disappeared. He's lonely, awkward, and yearns to be with family. We can all relate to that a little, right? Elvis is not your average protagonist that is born good at everything and is destined to save the world while not even breaking a sweat. Is that the power fantasy that people always talk about wanting from games? Anyway, the game lets you loose in this destroyed, long-decayed environment to explore, and right away this is another area where this game diverges from the game design most people are used to. In most games, the path the game wants you to go is laid out very clear. There may even be a mini-map and some visual icons pointing you not only to where you need to go, but to any items of interest along the way. I'd imagine this is because devs know that if people get lost early on, they're likely to give up and may never return. This game sets you free with that golden path laid out, sure. But there's an open door in the distance. Maybe a little shining color where there shouldn't be. If you take just a bit to investigate, you'll find your first reward, something that looks like it could actually be useful, so you put it in your pocket and you know that in the future, maybe it's worth your while to look around. Again, this isn't something that's completely unique to the game, but choosing not to hold the player's hand isn't a choice that will work for everyone. These mid-size or smaller games carefully consider these choices in order to enhance the story they want to tell, as opposed to choosing what works for the most amount of gamers. Not long after, you run into people that Elvis knows from his settlement, getting harassed by what appears to be man-sized frogs, with guns and bad attitudes. And you decide you can't just sit by and do nothing. You and your brother Robot decide to help. This is probably a good time to talk about the thing you'll be doing the most over a playthrough, the combat. Miasma Chronicles has the DNA of XCOM running through it, and if you like that kind of turn-based strategy, this will be instantly familiar to you. The system is heavily reliant on flanking to get a better chance to hit, so you'll be repositioning a lot as you try to get clean shots on the evildoers. Each of your characters you control has a unique skill tree that is pretty basic, but also absolutely works when it comes to letting you choose how you want to play. My favorite character is Diggs, the robot, who you can set up to be a tank if you want to, taking aggro from enemies and providing cover for your team. But I never played that way. Instead, one of the other things Diggs can do is be a disruptor on the battlefield. He has the ability to use both of his actions to run and still be able to shoot afterwards, which means he can be the most mobile member of your team by far. And his tackle ability, which is exactly what it sounds like, allows you to knock an enemy completely out of position and stun them for one turn. You can take a particularly dangerous enemy completely out of the fight using tackle, making what could be a really challenging fight much easier to deal with. Your enemies might have elaborate plans, but Diggs can run in, causing chaos, moving faster than anyone else, and taking out the biggest threat easily. I wound up using tackle multiple times and every fight is so good. Your tactics can also include taking advantage of high ground and environmental hazards, plus a wide array of consumables that do everything from healing your teammates to spawning minions to annoy your enemies. Before rounds start, you can also sneak up and ambush your foes, splitting your team up to surround them and using silenced weapons to take a bunch of them out without ever alerting the others. I found the combat to be just as fun as XCOM, even though it is in many ways much simpler. And because it is simpler, I think that even if you look at turn-based combat and think it might not be for you, you may find something you really like here. Another thing I really appreciated is how the game tells a lot of its story in the environment. Side characters you may only run into once or twice will leave you with a real impression of how this world works. You'll often come across remnants of ancient audio recordings, old destroyed robots, or computer terminals that you can access for bits of lore that add a little flavor to the post-apocalypse you're living in and clues to why it all came down the way it did. I read one review before I played this game that mentioned how Diggs basically plays the part of the magical Negro in this story, existing only to prop up and protect other characters, and I do like that article and did get how one could see it that way. But I do think all the characters are written respectfully, particularly Diggs, who is shown to be the emotional core of this story, providing the loyal strength that the other characters can draw on when they are at their lowest. Let me add the caveat that you have to absorb the whole story and not just the beginning of it in order to see this growth. Don't let my words fool you into thinking this story is going to win any awards, because it isn't, but I also don't think it's trying to. It's trying to be engaging and build out a world that might be familiar but is still full of new ideas, and it succeeds at that, if you can accept the character quirks as quirks and not as annoyances. Elvis's low self-esteem and confidence are really strange for a lead character, but if you give the story time, you may be surprised to find out why he is the way he is. Another important aspect is that the developers of this game are Swedish, not American, and they are telling a story set in the Deep South. To tell an authentic story set here comes with a ton of baggage, and to be honest, I think they do a pretty decent job of it. There's a lot of subtext that will just pass you by if you're not paying attention, and that's the beauty of a story that invites you to explore its world but doesn't demand it. So overall, with a plot that reminded me a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn, a great look to the graphics, really good music, and fun tactical gameplay, is Miasma Chronicles worth your time? Look, nobody can tell you what is worth your time other than you. If you heard what I said as I described this game I like and it sounds interesting to you, then by all means try it out. If it didn't grab you, then don't worry about it. Not every game will be for everybody, and isn't that the whole point of trying to bring back AA gaming in the first place? Smaller games means just that. Less games will sacrifice the vision of the developers at the altar of mass appeal, which ultimately means less games will take the world by storm, and that you and the entire internet feel are mind-blowing all at the same time. That feeling is great, but in a world of more AA games, games will be more niche. A game might take a big risk that some people love and vibe with, and some people couldn't care less about. These days, so many people, both gamers and creatives, put so much stock into how many people love a game at one time. The obsession over Steam player counts and video game sales show that is the case constantly. That singular focus on what game has the best graphics, highest frame rate, most concurrent players, that's a really closed-minded mentality. Those of us with open minds, we want more good games to play. We will give up that AAA billion-dollar budget, takes 10 years to create game, in order to get smaller scale games more regularly. We want game devs to be able to take a chance and make a passion project and maybe even fail, but that failure not put the whole studio out of a job. In the end, that's what Miasma Chronicles really is. It's never gonna win awards or break player count records. But that doesn't matter because for some who give it a fair chance, go into it with realistic expectations, there's a lot to like here. And since nobody can tell you if this game is worth it but you, tell me down in the comments. If you played it, what do you think?
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.